Greetings, class. Welcome to Duel Academy. Professor Rivas here, and today is day 2 of your Duel Academy Orientation. Today we will be discussing spells and traps, as well as basic rules of the game. By now, you should already be registered in Duel Academy and should have taken the entrance exam to see your rank. If you haven't, it's okay. Just follow the link below to get started with your Duel Academy experience. Without further ado, get your deck, get your game on, and let's get started. Last time we discussed how to read monsters. Well, today we're going to learn how to read spells and traps. To tell them apart, a spell card has a turquoise border, while a trap card has a purple border. Number 1 is the card name, which is the name of the card. Number 2 is the type, which will tell you if it's a spell or a trap. Number 3 is the icon, which tells you what type of spell or trap it is. A spell card can have no icon, an equip icon, field icon, quick play icon, ritual icon, and a continuous icon. A trap can have no icon, a continuous icon, or a counter icon. Number 4 is the card description, which tells you what the card does. Finally, number 5 is the card number, which is useful to tell which set a card came from and how you can sort your collection. So what's the difference between spells and traps anyways? Spell cards could be set face down on the field just like trap cards, however the rules for the two types of cards are different. Spell cards can be activated during the main phases even in the same turn that they are set, except for quick play spells, which we'll talk about in the future. Setting them does not allow you to use them on your opponent's turn. They can only be activated during your main phase. You can set a spell card face down on your field to bluff your opponent into thinking you have a powerful trap. Trap cards can be activated on both your turn and your opponent's turn, but they cannot be activated the same turn they are set. Now that we know the different types of cards, let's start learning how to play the game. In the Day 1 orientation, I explained that a duel is a single game, while a match is best 2 out of 3. There are 3 ways you can win a duel. 1. If you reduce your opponent's life points to 0, you win. This could be done by inflicting battle damage or card effect damage to your opponent's life points. 2. If your opponent runs out of cards and cannot draw during their turn, you win. And 3. If a card effect says you win, then you win. There are certain cards with effects that say you win the game if you meet a specific win condition. One of the most well-known cards with the win condition is Exodia the Forbidden One. There are 5 pieces of Exodia, and if you can get all 5 cards in your hand, you automatically win. Now, let's prepare how to duel. After greeting your opponent, shuffle your deck thoroughly. Then, you may shuffle and cut your opponent's deck. Next, after cutting, place the decks face down in the proper deck zone on the field. If you're using an extra deck with Xyz monsters, Synchro monsters, Fusion monsters, or Link monsters, place it face down in the extra deck zone. After that, both players show each other their side decks and record the number of cards in it, also confirming that they have 15 or fewer cards. This should be counted face down. If you exchange cards between your side deck and main decks after a duel, count the cards of your side deck or your opponent again to show that the number of cards remain the same. Last, play rock, paper, scissors or flip a coin. The winner decides to go first or second in the duel. For your next duels, the loser of the previous duel decides who goes first. If the previous duel ended in a tie, determine who starts first in the next duel with another coin toss, etc. Finally, draw 5 cards from the top of your deck, and this will be your starting hand. Now you're ready to duel. This part of the orientation is very important. It is the turn structure of a turn. There are certain actions that can only take place during certain phases, so take the time to review this section after the orientation is over. A turn is made up of 6 phases: draw phase, standby phase, main phase 1, battle phase, main phase 2, and end phase, all in that order. First, let's discuss the draw phase. This is the first phase and allows the turn player to draw one card from their deck. You must draw one card during your draw phase, and if you cannot, you lose the duel. However, a player does not draw if a card effect does not allow a draw. Also, the player who goes first cannot draw on their first turn. Traps and quick play spells can also be activated after you draw. The second phase is the standby phase. This phase is only important if you have a card or cards that activate during this phase, or if you have to pay a card cost during this phase. If you do not have these types of cards, you may move straight to main phase 1. However, you may still activate traps and quick play spells before moving on to main phase 1. The third phase of a turn is main phase 1. This is when you play most of your cards. You can normal summon, set, or change the battle position of a monster, activate a card's effect, and set spell and trap cards. These actions can be done in any order you want, but some have restrictions. The fourth phase of a turn is the battle phase. Now it's time to battle with your monster cards. This phase is divided into steps: the start step, battle step, damage step, and end step. This is important to know because some effect monsters have effects that occur maybe before damage calculation, during damage calculation, or after damage calculation. You do not have to conduct the battle phase every turn, even if you have a monster on the field. It's also important to note that the player who goes first cannot conduct their battle phase on their first turn. You must also know that you're able to activate traps and quick plays during this phase. The fifth phase is the main phase 2. The same things that can happen in main phase 1 can also be done in main phase 2, except for actions that can only occur once per turn, such as a normal summon or a normal set. The sixth and final phase is the end phase. Announce the end of your turn, and if there are any cards in the field which say, during the end phase, in their text, resolve those effects in this phase. If you have more than 6 cards in your hand at the end of this phase, select and discard cards to the graveyard until you only have 6 cards in your hand. Remember that one way, and the most common way to win a duel, is to reduce your opponent's life points to 0. This is mainly done through battle damage. So how do you determine battle damage? You calculate battle damage based on the battle position of the monster you're attacking. If you attack an attack position monster, compare the attack versus attack. If you attack a defense position monster, compare the monster's attack versus the attacked monster's defense. In the first example, you have Celtic Guardian versus Harpy Lady. Since they are both in attack position, you focus on their attack points. In the other example, you have Swordsman of Landstar versus Spirit of the Harp. Since Swordsman of Landstar is in attack mode, you focus on the attack points. And since Spirit of the Harp is in defense mode, you focus on her defense points. Here are some examples of what happens when 2 attack position monsters do battle. In the first example, let's say you control Elemental Hero Wildheart with 1500 attack, and your opponent controls M Warrior with 1000 attack. If you attack M Warrior with your Wildheart, M Warrior is destroyed, and your opponent loses 500 life points, since that was the difference between their attacks. In the second example, let's say you control Wildheart with 1500 attack, and your opponent controls Armored Lizard with 1500 attack. If Armored Lizard is attacked by your Wildheart, both monsters are destroyed and neither player loses life points, since the difference between their attacks is 0. In the third example, let's say you control Wildheart with 1500 attack, and your opponent controls Axe Raider with 1700 attack. If Axe Raider is attacked by your Wildheart, then Wildheart is destroyed, and you lose 200 life points, since that was the difference between their attacks. Now let's see what happens when an attack position monster attacks a monster in defense mode. In the first example, let's say you control Elemental Hero Wildheart with 1500 attack, and your opponent controls M Warrior with 500 defense. If you attack M Warrior with your Wildheart, M Warrior is destroyed, but your opponent does not lose life points since their monster was in defense mode. In the second example, let's say you control Wildheart with 1500 attack, and your opponent controls Jinzo with 1500 defense. If Jinzo is attacked by your Wild Heart, neither monster is destroyed and neither player loses life points. In other words, it's a stalemate. In the third example, let's say you control Wild Heart with 1500 attack and your opponent controls Spirit of the Heart with 2000 defense. If Spirit of the Heart is attacked by Wild Heart, then Wild Heart is not destroyed, but you lose 500 life points since that was the difference between the attack and defense points of the monsters. If there are no monsters on your opponent's side of the field, you can attack directly. The full amount of your attacking monster's attack is subtracted from your opponent's life points as battle damage. For example, if you have Elemental Hero Wild Heart and your opponent has no monsters on their side of the field, you could attack directly and your opponent would lose 1500 life points. Thank you so much for joining me on the Day 2 orientation. You are now able to start your first classes, Introduction to Monsters, and of Spells and Traps. Hope you all have a great day, and class dismissed.